Welcome to another Souls. I'm your host, Joe Chapin. Today, we're going to be talking about the Detroit Red Wings NHL draft. Obviously, today we expected the Detroit Red Wings to make a trade. In the NHL, in the NHL draft, there was no trades. There was not even a trade for picks or anything of that nature. So, all the hype going into it about how this could be the craziest draft and this is amazing, and everyone's going to be it's going to be the wildest draft ever. It was a total dud. But when we look at the Detroit Red Wings, obviously everyone is going to look at the Alex DeBrincat rumors that it still will be surfacing tomorrow. So if you listen to some of the Ottawa Senators beat writers from Ottawa, they were saying that Pierre Dorion said that he's not going to trade Alex DeBrincat for pennies, basically implying that the Detroit Red Wings didn't give him a suitable offer. What Pierre Dorion doesn't really understand, which Pierre Dorion doesn't understand a lot of things, but what he doesn't understand is he has no leverage. Like he has absolutely no leverage in this deal. There's a lot of teams that might be interested with Alex DeBrincat, but none of them have the cap to take on Alex DeBrincat. And there's another thing that Pierre Dorion said that he was kind of eye opening is that he didn't give permission for any of the players. For the Alex DeBrincat's team to work a contract out with a team that because they never got even close. So that's an interesting kind of tidbit on the Alex DeBrincat rumors, and obviously we all expected Alex DeBrincat to be traded to Detroit. I mean, a lot of people did, and I saw it on Twitter, and it was just ridiculous. But there's still a chance for Alex DeBrincat to be a Detroit Red Wing. Obviously, we're talking about it could potentially be the first round pick from Boston next year. It could be a second round pick that they have. They have three of them in the second round tomorrow, and it could be a prospect that they have with the Detroit Red Wings. But the Detroit Red Wings had a great draft, and I was not keen on a guy like Nate Danielson. I really wasn't. He wasn't really on my radar because I thought he was a little too. I didn't want to draft him at 9 in my mock draft. I kind of wanted to get like a Matthew Wood or someone along that line. So I gave you my list yesterday, and it didn't really turn out that great. But when we look at Nate Danielson, it was interesting. I read an article from The Athletic, Corey Pronman, who is a great writer for The Athletic. He compared Nate Danielson to Elias Lindholm from the Calgary Flames. Elias Lindholm is a very, very good player. He's going to be up for free agency too next year, and he's probably going to be available for trade too. But I don't think he matches the Detroit Red Wings timeline or what Yzerman is looking for in a trade. But in that article, Nate Danielson was referred to as a top of the line player. He's a very skilled player. He's tall, 6'2". I think he's 185. So he's got some skill. He played with the Brandon Wheat Kings, and the Wheat Kings weren't that great. He was their one great player, and if you watched him, you could kind of tell that the skill on his team was pretty much lacking because there was a lot of times where defenses were converging on him, and he still played pretty well. So that's a very good sign if you're a Detroit Red Wings fan because it shows that he can handle the load if he's asked to handle the load, and I like that a lot. But he wasn't on my radar, but I get the pick. He's a right-handed shot. He's a centerman. You could see what Stevie Y is doing, building his team up the middle and on the back end with let's go into the next pick because the next pick was pretty crazy too. Axel Sandin Pellikka. Now, Axel Sandin Pellikka, that was a guy I told you about yesterday in the NHL draft preview that I had. I talked to scouts. There was a scout I talked to, and he compared Axel Sandin Pellikka to a low floor of Tyson Barrie, who's a pretty decent top four defenseman, and he compared him to if he gets to the ceiling, which he said it depends on the organization he goes to. He said he could potentially be like an Erik Karlsson type. Now I've seen Chris Letang as a comparable. I've seen Brian Rafalski as a comparable. So you gotta first of all you gotta look at what Stevie Y is trying to do, right? And I know I heard on the radio today, 97 won the ticket. A lot of people are talking about how Stevie Y has been there 5 years. This is his fifth draft, and it's funny because a lot of people don't understand that when you rebuild in the NHL and you don't get the top picks, like Steve Eiserman has not had the luxury to pick at in the top three at all. So a lot of these players that he is picking, they might be 1 year away or 2 years away, or maybe even 3 years away. But he's done a pretty damn good job of filling this system up with good prospects, and this team is built to win well into the future. So I'm not gonna rush the rebuild. I think obviously everyone was looking at getting to Brinkett. I still think that's a possibility if we're gonna be totally honest. But one thing about Stevie is he's not gonna make a bad move to try to speed up the process. Now we talked about this before, but I think a lot of people need to get this through their fat heads is when we had Ken Holland, a lot of times what he did at the end of his tenure, which really a lot of people really that's where they turned on him. And I thought when we had Ken Holland, like, okay, he was a great general manager when they were competing for Stanley Cups and they were a competitive team and they lost Lidstrom and they lost Datsuk, and then they fell into that hole. He wasn't the general manager that's going to be a good general manager through a rebuild because he tried to sign Stephen Weiss and he tried to sign some of these guys and he just compounded mistakes. Applicator, Erickson, Danny DeKaiser, trying to speed up the process. When you speed up the process in a rebuild, it could go one of two ways. One, it could be really, really good and you just totally nail it out of the park. Usually that's not typical. Two is you go at a slow and steady speed. You don't make the fatal mistake that's going to cost you in the end. And that's what Yzerman is trying to avoid. When you look at this draft and you look at the players that Yzerman drafted, Sandin Pellikka is probably going to play in the Swedish Elite Hockey League next year. He's not going to be in the North American circuit. He's probably about 2 years away. Nate Danielson, we'll see what happens with him. But when you look at the Detroit Red Wings, they're trying to build this the right way. And when you look at their prospects, their pool, it's really well orchestrated by Stevie Y, and I'm excited because I think he's building a competitive team with this team. And I saw a lot of tweets about how the Yzer plan's kind of stupid and people don't understand it, or people think it's like stupid because we haven't made the playoffs yet. What I will say about this, okay? So a little thing that made this rebuild for Stevie go a little bit longer than I think he even imagined was you had the expansion draft with Vegas. You had two expansion drafts actually, where you had to protect certain players, and I think you had 6 players to protect and 1 goalie. So that kind of puts a damper on the way you want to construct the team, because obviously I think if Vegas wasn't a expansion team, potentially what you could have seen from the Detroit Red Wings was like, look, we're going to put Moritz Seider up here. But they kind of took their time with Seider, and he came after the expansion draft, and that's when he came through the system. Lucas Raymond, I think he could have came in a year earlier too. I think he would have been a kind of like an expansion kind of guy that could have got caught, where you could have left someone else on the line. So you had that, and you had COVID, where the way you scouted was a little bit different. Obviously, the OHL, the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, the WHL, they didn't play hockey that year, so that kind of put a damper on things. But all being said, like, I think the Yzerman rebuild is doing a pretty good job. I don't think people are really looking at it from the realistic standpoint. Like, when you think about it, Colorado took almost 9 years to be a team that was vying for a Stanley Cup. Like, it's not this easy process in the NHL. In like the Major League Baseball, you can kind of rebuild and kind of speed up the process with the if you go out and pay someone in the free agent market. The thing about the NHL is the cap is so tight for a lot of teams So if you make a mistake with a contract, it will fatally flaw you. It will fatally kill you. It'll kill your franchise, and you'll be in the same predicament that you were with Kenny Holland. So I know people want to take this like parallel line where you just go straight up the thing. It's not really possible. It's not really possible to do that. Now, I do think that Alex DeBrincat stuff could be a potential possibility, and there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be looking to shed payroll. But when we look at the way that Steve Yzerman has built this team, you look at the way that he has put this team together. Going forward in the future, this team will be really, really good, and it's going to be interesting to watch to see what the Detroit Red Wings do, you know, tomorrow's part of the draft, because when you look at the way they drafted today, they got key players that can help them out in the future. They can even be trade prospects that you could use in a trade. So I'm not really worried. I think Stevie Y has it covered, and I know he said he was, he was talking to ESPN. He thinks they're still in a rebuild. Stevie Y is always going to think that way. Like until Stevie Y sees actual progress on the ice, he's not going to tell you, "Yeah, rebuild's over, guys. That's what it is. Rebuild's over." He's not going to say that. He will never say that. He's kind of when you listen to him to speak, he's a cautiously optimistic guy. So he's not going to come out and say the rebuild's over because it might not be. He's not going to come out and say that when there's no proof that it is. I mean, obviously we've seen the progress that they've made year from year to year to year, but facts are mean. The way that you play is kind of the barometer of where you are, and he knows where they are, and it should be a wake up call because obviously, Yzerman sees this team a certain type of way. He obviously knows how to build championship type teams. I wouldn't be worried about the Yzer plan. I wouldn't be worried about Steve Yzerman. This was a great draft, a great first day for the Detroit Red Wings, and I think that they're going to do a pretty damn good job moving forward. So we will see you tomorrow as we go through all the picks tomorrow, and hopefully there might be some more news. So we will see you tomorrow on Between the Whistles Sports.